You turn on your Windows 11 PC tomorrow morning. The desktop loads, your files are there, your applications are installed. Everything looks exactly the way you left it. Nothing is broken, nothing is missing. Then a notification slides into the corner of your screen. Your Windows subscription renews in 7 days. Your first instinct is to dismiss it. Probably Microsoft 365, you think, or OneDrive storage. You open the notification to check. It is not Microsoft 365. It is Windows itself. The operating system running on the machine sitting on your desk has become a monthly bill. And the question that follows is the one this notification refuses to answer directly. What happens if you stop paying? Before going any further, this needs to be stated plainly. Microsoft has not announced a universal monthly subscription fee for Windows 11 Home or Pro users. Today, eligible upgrades from Windows 10 to Windows 11 remain free for qualifying devices. Windows 11 can be activated through a digital license or a product key. Ordinary consumer Windows is not currently a subscription service in the sense this documentary is exploring. That distinction matters. This is a hypothetical. A thought experiment built around a real question. Because the interesting part of this story is not that Microsoft announced anything. The interesting part is that the question is no longer as far-fetched as it might sound. And understanding why requires looking at what Windows licensing actually is today and where Microsoft's broader business model has been heading for years. Most people who use Windows have never thought carefully about what they actually own when they use it. You buy a laptop. Windows is on it, you turn it on, you use it. The operating system feels like part of the machine, the way the keyboard is part of the machine or the display is part of the machine. You paid for the computer. Windows came with it. That feels like ownership. But what you actually received is a license. Not ownership of Windows itself, but permission to run it under Microsoft's terms. For most consumer PCs, this license is embedded in the purchase price and associated with the device through what Microsoft calls a digital license. Microsoft's documentation describes this as a digital entitlement tied to the hardware, which can support reactivation if something goes wrong with the system. This distinction between owning a product and licensing a product has been invisible for most of Windows history because the license behaved exactly like ownership from the user's perspective. You paid once. You used it indefinitely. Nothing expired. Nothing renewed. The hypothetical changes that relationship at its foundation. And the reason it is worth exploring is that Microsoft has already changed that relationship in parts of its business. Microsoft's enterprise licensing documentation describes something called subscription activation for Windows Enterprise. A business can license Windows Enterprise E3 or E5 as a subscription, allowing eligible devices running Windows Pro to step up to enterprise-level features. That subscription renews. If it lapses, the device returns to its underlying Windows Pro state. The subscription and the access it provides are directly connected. This is not the same as charging every home user a monthly fee to use Windows 11. It is a commercial licensing mechanism for organizations that need enterprise-grade features and management capabilities. The populations and purposes are different, but the mechanism already exists. Microsoft already knows how to operate a model where Windows-level access is connected to a recurring subscription. The technical and business infrastructure for subscription-based Windows licensing is not theoretical. It exists in the enterprise market right now. The hypothetical simply asks, what happens if that philosophy moves from the corporate licensing department into the notification that appears on your home computer? To understand why Microsoft might ever consider such a move, you have to understand what subscription revenue means to a technology company compared to one-time sales. A one-time Windows license creates a clean transaction. Customer buys PC. License is included. Revenue is recognized. Transaction is complete. The customer now has a device and an operating system, and the financial relationship is essentially finished unless they buy another computer or a separate Microsoft product. A subscription changes every part of that equation. Revenue becomes predictable and recurring. The customer relationship does not end at the point of purchase. It continues every month, creating ongoing touchpoints, ongoing service relationships, and ongoing opportunities to deliver value and to expand the services the customer is paying for. Microsoft has already built one of the most successful subscription businesses in the technology industry through Microsoft 365. Hundreds of millions of users pay monthly or annually for access to Office applications, cloud storage, and connected services. The company understands recurring revenue deeply. It has demonstrated that consumers will accept subscription pricing for software they previously purchased outright. The logical extension of that business model, taken to its hypothetical extreme, would be the operating system itself. Not as a standalone purchase that happens once when the PC is bought, but as an ongoing service that the user maintains access to through continued payment. Here is where the hypothetical becomes genuinely interesting, because the question is not simply whether Microsoft would charge monthly for Windows. The more important question is what exactly you would be paying for. Windows is not one thing. It is an operating system, a security platform, a cloud services gateway, a gaming environment, an AI interface, a productivity foundation, and a device management layer all operating simultaneously. A subscription model could carve that complexity into tiers in any number of ways. Imagine a basic tier that provides the desktop, file management, security updates, and core functionality. Everything needed to use the PC as a computer, free or very low cost, to ensure Windows remains viable on the billions of existing devices. Then, imagine a premium tier that adds advanced AI assistance, enhanced cloud backup, premium security features, extended support, cross-device licensing, and services that go beyond what the operating system traditionally provided. Under that model, the monthly payment would not simply be rent for the operating system you already have. It would theoretically be payment for a continuously expanding set of services built around the operating system. Some users might find that compelling. Others would find themselves paying monthly for services they never asked for in order to maintain access to a desktop they used to simply own. Return to the question the hypothetical leaves deliberately unanswered. What happens if you stop paying? The answer depends entirely on how Microsoft designed the subscription model, and different design choices lead to very different outcomes. Microsoft could take the most consumer-friendly approach and simply stop delivering premium features when a subscription lapses, while leaving the core operating system fully functional. Stop paying, lose the AI assistant, and advanced backup, but keep the desktop and your files. Or Microsoft could take a stricter approach where the subscription is more directly tied to activation status. Windows displays warnings. Personalization features stop working. Eventually, the system enters a reduced functionality state similar to what unactivated Windows currently displays. Or Microsoft could tie the subscription to an account-based license that simply requires active status to maintain the device's Windows entitlement. An expired subscription could mean Windows no longer considers the device properly licensed, with consequences that depend on how strictly that status is enforced. None of these outcomes is necessarily what Microsoft would choose, but each represents a real possibility within the design space of subscription licensing. And the range of those possibilities is precisely why the question of what happens when payment stops matters so much. Consider someone with a laptop in a location where internet access is unreliable. A remote research station, perhaps, or a rural property with inconsistent connectivity, or simply a household that temporarily loses service for an extended period. Today, standard Windows activation does not require the PC to constantly verify its license status over the internet. A device with a valid digital license can continue operating normally through ordinary internet outages. Microsoft's activation system is designed around confirming the license at certain points, rather than treating every session as a payment checkpoint. A subscription model introduces a new verification requirement. At some frequency, the system would need to confirm that the subscription remains active. How often? Every login? Every week? Every 30 days? The answer shapes the offline experience in significant ways. A monthly verification requirement is manageable for most users and mostly invisible. A stricter system that requires more frequent confirmation could create genuine problems for users whose machines are legitimately offline for extended periods. This is not a problem Microsoft cannot solve, but it is a problem that does not currently exist with traditional Windows licensing, and subscription conversion would require solving it in a way that does not punish users for circumstances outside their control. The old hardware question is where the subscription model creates its most uncomfortable implications. Imagine a computer purchased 7 years ago. The hardware is completely functional. The processor handles every task the owner requires. The storage is fast, the display is sharp, Windows runs without difficulty. The machine has no technical reason to be retired. Under traditional licensing, this computer simply continues to exist as a working PC. The Windows license was paid for when the machine was purchased. There is no ongoing cost associated with using the existing hardware with the existing operating system. Under a subscription model, that calculation changes every month. The user is not paying for the machine, which is already owned. They are paying for continued access to the operating system running on it, month after month, for as long as they want to use the computer. At some point, the accumulated subscription payments begin to invite a comparison. How does the monthly fee relate to the remaining value of the hardware? At what point does continuing to pay for Windows on aging hardware stop making financial sense? This is where Linux enters the story, not as an ideological preference and not as a technically superior alternative in every scenario. Simply as an operating system that does not require a Windows subscription license to run on hardware the user already owns. A user running Linux on a 7-year-old machine is not paying monthly for the operating system. The machine keeps working. The software keeps receiving updates. The computing workflow continues without a recurring payment tied to the desktop environment. For users who currently stay on Windows without thinking carefully about cost, because the cost was embedded in a one-time hardware purchase, the monthly subscription model would make the Linux comparison explicit in a way it has never been before. The Microsoft account connection deserves its own examination. because subscription licensing and identity-based licensing are natural partners. A product key can be written on a physical card and stored in a drawer. A digital license can be associated with a device without requiring continuous account verification. Neither inherently requires the user to maintain an active, constantly verified online account to use the software. A subscription is different. A subscription is naturally tied to a person rather than a device. The person has the subscription. The person signs into a device. The device verifies that the person's subscription is active. This is how subscription software typically works across the industry. That means a Windows subscription model would likely make the Microsoft account more central to the Windows experience than it already is. Not just recommended for syncing and service integration, as it currently is, but potentially required for maintaining the license that allows Windows to function. The implications compound. A Microsoft account already connects to OneDrive, Outlook, Microsoft 365, Xbox, the Microsoft Store, and whatever other services a user has associated with it. Add the Windows subscription to that list, and the Microsoft account becomes the gateway to the operating system itself. The security of that account, the availability of that account, and the consequences of that account, experiencing any kind of problem, all become more significant when the account is also the thing keeping your desktop running. Give the subscription model its strongest possible argument before dismantling it. If Microsoft built a genuinely compelling subscription offering, the value proposition could make sense for certain users. Imagine the subscription includes access to the current Windows version, automatic upgrades to future versions, a meaningful allocation of cloud storage, advanced AI features that genuinely improve productivity, premium security monitoring, cross-device licensing for multiple machines in a household, and some level of direct technical support. For a user who currently pays separately for several of those things, a well-designed Windows subscription could actually simplify and potentially reduce their total Microsoft spending. Instead of managing separate subscriptions for storage, Office, and security software, everything lives under one recurring payment tied to the operating system. That is not an obviously bad deal. For users already inside Microsoft's ecosystem who use most of those services anyway, the consolidation could feel like a reasonable trade. The risk is not in the first version of that offer. The risk is in what the definition of the subscription becomes over time. Subscription pricing has a characteristic pattern across the software industry. The initial price is often low enough to feel like a clear value. Introductory rates make the decision easy. Then, over time, the price adjusts upward. Features that were included become premium. New capabilities arrive behind a higher tier. The definition of what is bundled in the base price quietly shifts. This is not unique to Microsoft. It is a structural property of subscription business models. The initial price sets expectations. Subsequent price changes are smaller in absolute terms and feel more manageable than a large one-time increase would. Each individual adjustment is defensible. The cumulative effect over years is something users rarely calculate when they first subscribe. A hypothetical Windows subscription at $3 per month sounds trivially affordable. The same subscription at $8 per month, after several years and several price adjustments, is $100 per year for an operating system license. On hardware the user already owns, on top of whatever other subscriptions the user maintains for storage, productivity, and entertainment. The total is not necessarily unreasonable compared to the alternative of buying a new licensed PC every few years, but the psychological relationship is completely different. Each month's payment is a renewal of permission rather than a historical investment. Consider Apple's position in this hypothetical market. Apple ties macOS to Apple hardware. When you buy a Mac, macOS is included. There is no separate macOS subscription. Updates to macOS have been free for years. The cost of the operating system is embedded in the hardware purchase, which is typically premium priced compared to Windows PC alternatives. If Windows became a monthly subscription, the macOS model would look different to consumers making purchasing decisions. The Mac becomes not just a hardware choice, but a way to access an operating system without a recurring fee. The value calculation for the higher hardware price changes when the Windows alternative involves ongoing licensing costs. Linux presents an even starker comparison. No hardware premium, no operating system license fee, no subscription, just the hardware cost and the software freedom. These are not arguments that macOS or Linux is superior in every scenario. Compatibility, software availability, hardware ecosystem, and user familiarity all matter enormously. But a subscription Windows model would make these comparisons more concrete and more frequent than they currently are. Step back and look at Microsoft's broader trajectory. The company has spent the last decade transforming itself from a software company that primarily sold one-time licenses into a services company that primarily generates recurring revenue. Azure Cloud Services, Microsoft 365, Dynamics, security products, AI services. The consistent pattern is moving customers from one-time transactions into ongoing service relationships. Windows has occupied an unusual position in that transformation. It is Microsoft's most universally used product. It is the platform that makes everything else possible on the PC. And it has remained, for ordinary consumers, primarily a license-based product rather than a subscription service. That tension between Windows as a traditional software product and Microsoft as an increasingly subscription-oriented business is real. It exists right now. The question of whether that tension eventually resolves in favor of subscription Windows is genuinely open. Today, the answer to that question remains unchanged. Windows 11, Home and Pro are not consumer subscription products. Microsoft's current documentation describes free upgrades for eligible devices, traditional activation mechanisms, and licensing models that do not impose a universal monthly fee on ordinary Windows users. The enterprise subscription model exists, but it is a commercial licensing arrangement for a specific audience. The hypothetical explored in this documentary is not a prediction. It is a question about what the consequences would look like if Microsoft's subscription philosophy fully extended to its most important consumer product. Return to the notification. Your Windows subscription renews in 7 days. The frightening part of that sentence is not the dollar amount. You can negotiate the dollar amount. You can decide whether the dollar amount represents value. The frightening part is what the relationship has become. Today, most users think of Windows as something that came with the computer, a permanent part of the machine they own. Changing it is inconvenient but not impossible. Keeping it costs nothing ongoing after the initial purchase. In the hypothetical, that relationship inverts. The machine is yours. The operating system running on it is something you maintain access to through continuing payment. The desktop is still there. Your files are still there. But whether they remain accessible in the familiar way has become, at least in part, a function of whether your subscription remains current. Software subscriptions are now normal. Music, video, cloud storage, productivity applications, creative tools, security software, AI assistants. The subscription model won that argument across most of the software industry. But an operating system sits underneath all of those subscriptions. It is the layer that makes the machine usable. It is the reason the subscription software has somewhere to run. If that layer becomes a subscription too, the question stops being about Microsoft's revenue model. It becomes a question about what it means to own a computer. Because once your operating system is something you rent rather than something you have, you are not simply paying for Windows. You are paying for permission to keep using the machine the way you want. And that permission renewing every 30 days is a different kind of relationship with your computer than anyone buying a PC today signed up for.